All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down a truly terrifying, intense, and strictly fact-based aviation incident that just recently grabbed headlines. We're looking at an Air India flight traveling from Phuket, Thailand, all the way to Delhi. It started out as a completely routine, quiet journey, and then suddenly it transformed into an absolute mid-air nightmare. Seriously, if you've ever wondered why flight attendants are so incredibly strict about that seatbelt sign, well, the data and passenger accounts we're about to unpack are going to make it crystal clear.
Okay, let's dive into this. 300. That figure right there, that represents the massive, terrifying 300-foot sudden altitude drop this commercial aircraft experienced mid-air. I mean, just imagine it for a second. You're inside a metal tube, cruising peacefully thousands of feet up in the sky, and suddenly, boom, the floor just literally drops out from under you. And not just a little bump. We're talking a drop the length of an entire football field. In a fraction of a second, gravity practically reverses. And that is exactly what happened to the people on this flight. To really wrap our heads around the sheer chaos of this event, we've got to look at the timeline. Because this didn't happen during a bumpy takeoff or landing, no. This hit roughly an hour and a half into the flight. Picture the cabin atmosphere for a second. It's dark, the lights are dimmed, the hum of the engine is just this nice, soothing background noise. The vast majority of the 134 passengers and 8 crew members on board were fast asleep. It was a completely serene environment. And then, out of nowhere, a violent jolt hits. Because they were sleeping, so many people were completely unprepared and, crucially, unsecured. As the plane dropped out from under them, those unsecured passengers were violently thrown upward, literally smashing their heads right into the aircraft's ceiling.
That brings us to Section 1, plane dropped 300 feet, the incident.
To really ground our analysis in the actual human experience of this event, we have to listen to the visceral accounts from the passengers themselves. One passenger reported that the plane suddenly, quote, turned around and was rolling for 2 to 3 minutes. Now just imagine the absolute terror of that. Your plane is violently shaking, jolting, and rolling for a sustained 120 to 180 seconds. In a situation like that, time just completely slows down, doesn't it? Another passenger explicitly stated that it felt like the plane was definitely going to crash. It was just absolute helpless panic up there in the air.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 2, those 3 minutes of terror, the injuries.
The incredible kinetic forces exerted on the aircraft transferred directly to the passengers inside, especially the ones who weren't strapped into their seats. And the list of injuries reported? It's really tough to hear, but it perfectly illustrates just how violent this drop was. We're talking fractured hands. There were numerous head injuries from people essentially being catapulted into the roof of the aircraft. One passenger actually recounted that their brother's shoulder and lower back were badly injured. And as a really stark reminder of the extreme pressure changes and physical trauma involved here, someone even suffered a burst eardrum. It's just wild.
Now, thankfully, and this is a huge thankfully, the pilots were able to regain control of the aircraft and managed to make a safe landing in Delhi. But the aftermath on the ground? It was nothing short of chaotic. Visual reports from the airport confirmed that battered passengers were literally exiting the terminal in wheelchairs. Medics were deployed everywhere, and some folks were in such bad shape they had to be brought out on stretchers. It was a full-scale medical emergency unfolding right there on the tarmac as first responders scrambled to triage the wounded.
Which leads us to Section 3, difference between claims and reality.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the massive gap that emerged between the corporate messaging and the actual medical facts once the dust settled. So initially, Air India claimed that all passengers and crew were safe, explicitly stating there were no serious injuries. But the reality reported by India's aviation regulator, the DGCA, paints a very, very different picture. They officially reported that 15 people were injured, and 7 of those individuals were actually admitted to Fortis Hospital for medical treatment. Quite a difference, right? Furthermore, if we zoom out and look at the broader picture inside the cabin, according to estimates provided directly by the passengers who lived through it, roughly 70 to 80% of the people on board suffered at least some form of minor injury. So yeah, while not everyone needed an ambulance or a hospital bed, the physical impact of that turbulence was extremely widespread across the seating chart. It left the vast majority of the cabin bruised, bumped, and deeply, deeply shaken.
Let's break down the specific verified medical data documented right there at the airport clinic. The initial triage evaluated 3 passengers directly at the terminal. According to the official report, these 3 were conscious, oriented, and had stable vitals.
Their x-rays didn't show any major structural injuries, and they were ultimately discharged with some oral medications. Additionally, 4 female crew members were brought in, evaluated for their injuries, and successfully completed their medical checkups. So that gives us a really factual, localized snapshot of the immediate triage that day.
All right, let's pivot a bit here. Section 4, what is turbulence? The science pivot.
We've looked at the terrifying human impact, but to understand what actually caused this, we have to look up at the atmosphere. Simply put, turbulence is a sudden, extreme change in airflow. When this happens, it causes an aircraft to violently shake. The plane starts moving erratically, pitching up, down, or sideways, and in severe cases, it rapidly drops in altitude. That sudden shift in air currents, that is the exact scientific phenomenon that sucked this Air India plane down 300 feet and made the passengers feel like they were falling completely out of the sky. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what triggers those violent airflow shifts. As noted in the reporting for this incident, the main culprits are typically bad weather systems, pockets of heavy rain, or the complex air currents you get when flying over highly irregular, mountainous terrain. When a plane flies through those specific environmental conditions, the smooth, predictable air it normally glides on suddenly turns chaotic and swirling, and that leads directly to the severe jolts we've been talking about.
So the crucial point is this. Despite how absolutely terrifying it feels inside the cabin, the aircraft itself is heavily engineered for exactly this scenario. As scary as a 300-foot drop is, airplane seats and the structural hardware of the plane are specifically designed to withstand extreme turbulence. The wings weren't breaking apart, the seats weren't failing, the heavy engineering did exactly what it was supposed to do to keep the structural integrity of the aircraft totally intact.
But here is the ultimate takeaway from this explainer, the one thing we really want you to leave with. The plane itself can survive a 300-foot drop. The specially engineered seats can survive it. But the only thing keeping you from violently hitting the ceiling when the floor suddenly drops out is a simple thin strap of fabric across your lap. So, I leave you with this question. On your next flight, will you keep your seatbelt fastened even while you're sleeping? Think about it. Thanks so much for diving into this explainer with me today, and we'll catch you in the next one.